My name is Maya Chen, and I am 31 years old. As I drove toward the Rosewood Manor Estate, my palms were sweating against the steering wheel. 3 years of absence from my hometown, and now I was returning with property deeds hidden in my bag. My cousin's wedding invitation had arrived with a handwritten note from my aunt. "We're keeping it intimate, so please don't be offended by the simple arrangements." Little did they know that tomorrow at the rehearsal dinner, everything would change. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The moment I walked through the grand entrance of Rosewood Manor, I was struck by the opulence I had come to love but my family had never seen. The same majestic chandeliers illuminated the marble foyer, the same hand-carved balustrades curved along the grand staircase, and the same unspoken judgment hung in the air. My small-town Pennsylvania upbringing was a world away from this historic estate, right down to the exclusive address my family still couldn't pronounce correctly. "Maya, you made it," my mother called from across the lobby, not bothering to approach me. Her voice carried the same subtle disappointment it always had when addressing me, instead of my sister Vanessa. I set my designer handbag down and wandered through the ornate space, trailing my fingers along familiar surfaces that my family assumed I was touching for the first time. My father, Russell, had worked as a high school economics teacher for over 30 years, instilling in us the values of financial prudence and practical career choices. Our family ethos revolved around stable jobs, sensible investments, and the shadow of expectations cast for my sister to follow his path into education. Vanessa had dutifully complied, becoming an assistant principal at just 33. "Your sister arrived an hour ago," my mother informed me as I approached. "She's already helping cousin Emma with the seating charts." Such a thoughtful girl. The pride in her voice was unmistakable, the kind she never used when discussing my unconventional career path. "That's great," I replied, the words feeling mechanical after years of practice. "I'll have to catch up with her later." My mother continued chattering about Vanessa and her husband Kevin, their new house in the good school district, and all the respectable accomplishments that made them the golden children of our family. Not once did she ask about my life in Singapore or my work in international real estate development. Her eyes briefly scanned my tailored silk blazer and designer watch before looking away, as if my apparent prosperity was an uncomfortable topic. "You know, we weren't sure you'd come all this way for the wedding," she said instead. "It must have been expensive for you." I excused myself and headed toward the East Wing where guests were being housed. Like everything else at Rosewood, it exuded understated luxury. The estate had been built in 1891 by a railroad magnate and restored to its original glory 3 years ago by its new owner, me. Not that my family knew this detail. The suite I entered wasn't my usual master quarters, but a lovely guest room with views of the English gardens. I had instructed my property manager, Daniel, to reserve it under my name, like any regular guest. My private residence on the top floor would remain my secret until the right moment. I sat on the antique four-poster bed, running my hand over the Egyptian cotton sheets, remembering the night I first discovered Rosewood Manor was for sale. I had already made a name for myself in Singapore's competitive real estate market, specializing in historic property restorations across Asia. When the opportunity to purchase this piece of American heritage in my hometown appeared, I couldn't resist bringing my expertise back to Pennsylvania. Opening my suitcase, I carefully removed the folder containing tomorrow's revelation. Inside were the property deeds, renovation permits, and my welcome speech as the venue's owner. 3 years ago, when I purchased Rosewood Manor, I had kept my ownership quiet through a holding company. Even when I chose to open it as a luxury wedding venue, I had remained the silent owner, communicating through my management team. My cousin Emma had booked the venue without knowing her financially struggling cousin owned it. The irony was almost too perfect. For years, my family had dismissed my international business as mysterious and probably unsuccessful. My achievements in Singapore went unacknowledged. My parents had attended Vanessa's teaching award ceremonies but had always been too busy to visit me abroad. "Is that why you seemed so fixated on him that night?" She nodded, looking slightly embarrassed. "I had this ridiculous fantasy about meeting him at a book signing someday. I even practiced what I'd say." She laughed at herself. Then there he was with my sister of all people. Life has a strange sense of humor. The revelation was unexpected but somehow fitting. One final twist in our complicated history. Why tell me now? Because we're in a better place, she said thoughtfully. And because I want you to know that I see how perfect he is for you. How he looks at you like you're the most fascinating person in the world. You deserve that, Liv. Our wedding day dawned clear and warm, the botanical garden lush with early summer blooms. As I prepared with my closest friends, including Rebecca, who had flown in from Chicago to be my maid of honor, I felt a profound sense of rightness. There were no last-minute jitters, no doubts, just a quiet certainty about the step I was taking. Mia arrived early to help with my hair, her own recently cut into a sleek bob that signaled her post-divorce reinvention. "You look radiant," she said, adjusting my simple veil. "Truly happy." "I am," I confirmed, squeezing her hand. "Thank you for being here." "For everything." The ceremony was exactly as we'd envisioned. Intimate, meaningful, focused on the promises we were making, rather than spectacle or tradition. When James recited his vows, his voice steady and sure, I saw in his eyes the same certainty I felt in my heart. This was right. This was where we were meant to be. At the reception, held in the garden's glass-walled pavilion, my father gave a toast that brought tears to every eye. "To find love once in life is fortunate," he said, raising his glass. "To find a deeper, truer love after loss is a rare blessing. Olivia and James, may your journey together be as thoughtful and profound as the stories you both create." Later, as James and I danced beneath paper lanterns strung among the pavilion's beams, I caught sight of Mia watching us, a bittersweet smile on her face. When our eyes met, she raised her glass in a silent toast. I nodded in acknowledgement, grateful for the peace we had found after so much turbulence. "Happy?" James murmured against my ear, his arms steady around me. "Completely," I assured him. "And you?" More than I knew was possible. As we swayed to the music, surrounded by those we loved, I reflected on the strange, winding path that had led us here. 10 years earlier, I could never have imagined this outcome, that my sister's betrayal would eventually lead me to the great love of my life, that pain would transform into wisdom, that broken trust could be replaced by something stronger and more enduring. The story wasn't over, of course. Life would continue to unfold in unexpected ways. But in that moment, dancing with my husband in a garden blooming with new life, I was certain of one thing. Sometimes the detours and disappointments that seem like endings are actually beginnings in disguise. We just have to be brave enough to keep moving forward, to remain open to possibilities we never could have planned. And sometimes, if we're very fortunate, we find ourselves exactly where we're meant to be, with someone who makes the entire journey, even its painful chapters, worthwhile. The first 5 years of marriage with James unfolded like chapters in a beautifully crafted novel, each page revealing new depths, occasional plot twists, and the kind of character development that can only come from two people genuinely committed to growing together. We settled into our Park Slope apartment, establishing routines that honored both our individual creative processes and our life as a couple. James's career flourished. His third novel, completed during our first year of marriage, became his breakthrough commercial success, landing on the New York Times bestseller list and earning him the kind of literary recognition that opened doors previously closed. I continued climbing the ranks at my publishing house, eventually becoming the youngest executive editor in the company's history, specializing in literary fiction with a focus on emerging international voices. "We make a good team," James often said, and it was true. We edited each other's work, his novels, and my occasional essays for literary journals, with unflinching honesty and unwavering support. We celebrated each other's victories without competition or resentment. We built a home filled with books, art from our travels, and the kind of comfortable silence that exists only between people who truly understand each other. Our relationship with my family evolved as well. My parents, now in their early 60s, had become increasingly fond of James, treating him more like a son than a son-in-law. My father, in particular, had found in James an intellectual companion who shared his love of history and philosophy, leading to lengthy discussions during holiday gatherings that would continue via email for weeks afterward. Mia's life had taken unexpected turns in the aftermath of her divorce from Ethan. After finalizing the split, she had thrown herself into her career with renewed focus, eventually securing a position as the curator for a prestigious gallery in Chelsea, specializing in contemporary Asian art. The role suited her natural eye for aesthetics and her networking abilities, bringing her a professional confidence I hadn't seen in her before. Our sisterly relationship, once fractured by betrayal, had gradually reformed into something different but surprisingly strong. The shared experience of her divorce had, ironically, brought us closer. I became the stable presence she could turn to during her darkest moments, offering the kind of support that came from a place of genuine compassion rather than obligation. "I never thought we'd be here," she admitted one evening, 3 years after my wedding, as we shared dinner at her new apartment in the West Village. "After what happened with Ethan, I assumed you'd hate me forever." "I tried," I confessed with a small smile, "but hating someone takes so much energy. And ultimately what happened led me to James. It's hard to stay angry when the detour led somewhere better than the original destination." She nodded thoughtfully, twirling pasta around her fork. "You two have something special. Anyone can see it." After a moment, she added, "I've been seeing someone. Not seriously yet, but promising." His name was Adrian Chen, no relation to us. A corporate attorney with an unexpected passion for contemporary art. They had met at one of her gallery openings, where he had asked surprisingly insightful questions about the exhibition. He was divorced like Mia, with a 7-year-old daughter from his marriage. "He's thoughtful," Mia explained. "Steady. Not the kind of guy the first would have looked at twice in my 20s. But now—" She shrugged. "Now I appreciate someone who calls when he says he will and actually listens when I talk." I was genuinely happy for her, recognizing the maturity in her assessment. The Mia of 10 years ago had chased excitement and forbidden fruit. This Mia seemed to value substance and character, a promising evolution. When I shared the news with James later that evening, he observed, "People can change if they're brave enough to face their own patterns." "Sounds like Mia's done some important work on herself." "She has," I agreed. "It's been remarkable to watch, actually." James and I had discussed children early in our relationship, agreeing that we both wanted a family eventually. But eventually kept extending as our careers demanded more of our attention, and as we enjoyed the freedom of our child-free life together. Spontaneous weekend trips to the Berkshires, late nights at literary events, the luxury of uninterrupted writing time. 5 years into our marriage, however, the conversation resurfaced with new urgency. I was 35, James 41, and the abstract, "someday," had begun to feel more concrete. "I've been thinking," James said one Sunday morning as we lingered over coffee in our sun-drenched kitchen, "about timelines and priorities." I looked up from the manuscript I was reviewing. "That sounds ominous." He smiled, reaching for my hand across the table. "Not ominous. Just important. I realized recently that when I imagine our future, I see children in it. And I'm wondering if we should stop thinking about it in the abstract and start considering it as a real next step." The conversation that followed was honest and thoughtful, weighing the changes parenthood would bring, against the growing desire we both felt to create a family together. By the end of that Sunday, we had made the decision to try for a baby, a commitment that felt both terrifying and absolutely right. Pregnancy didn't come as easily as we'd hoped. After 8 months of disappointment, we consulted specialists who identified some minor fertility issues that could be addressed but would require patience and medical intervention. The journey became more complicated than we'd anticipated, filled with temperature charts, timed procedures, and the particular grief of monthly disappointments. During this challenging period, it was Mia who proved to be an unexpected source of strength. Having recently become engaged to Adrian, she was in a happy place herself, but demonstrated remarkable sensitivity to our struggle. "It's not fair," she said one afternoon when we met for coffee after one of my doctor's appointments. "You and James would be such wonderful parents." "Life isn't fair," I replied, a lesson we'd both learned in different ways. "But we're not giving up." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're the strongest person I know, Liv. You'll get through this, whatever happens." Her words meant more than she could know. This vote of confidence from the person who had once caused me such pain now offering genuine support during one of my most vulnerable chapters. Nearly 2 years into our fertility journey, we received devastating news. James's mother, whom I had grown to love during our visits to England, was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. We immediately flew to London, where the prognosis became clear. The disease had already spread, leaving limited treatment options and a timeline measured in months rather than years. "We should stay," James said as we lay sleepless in his childhood bedroom, the weight of impending loss heavy between us. "At least for now." I agreed without hesitation. My fertility treatments could wait. My publishing work could be managed remotely. What mattered was being present for his family during this impossible time. What had been planned as a 2-week visit extended into 3 months. I watched my husband transform into his mother's caretaker, witnessing a tenderness in him that deepened my love in ways I hadn't thought possible. We spent evenings in the hospital, and later in the hospice facility, James reading aloud from his mother's favorite books while I kept her comfortable with ice chips and gentle conversation. When Eleanor Harris finally passed, it was peaceful, her family surrounding her, James holding her hand until the final moment. At the funeral, he delivered a eulogy so moving that even the stoic British relatives openly wept. His words captured not just his grief, but a profound gratitude for the woman who had shaped him into the man I loved. Our return to New York came with unexpected clarity. "Life is so fragile," James said as we unpacked our suitcases, still heavy with grief. "I don't want to waste any more time waiting for perfect circumstances." We agreed to put the fertility treatments on hold and pursue adoption instead, a path we had discussed previously but never fully explored. The decision felt right, a way to create family that wasn't dependent on biology but on love and intention. The adoption process introduced us to a new landscape of paperwork, home studies, and emotional uncertainty. But it also brought us Zoe, a baby girl whose birth mother had selected us from the profiles at the agency, specifically citing James's books as part of her decision. "I want my daughter to be raised by someone who understands people so deeply," she had written in her letter to us. "Someone who can help her make sense of a complicated world." Meeting our daughter for the first time in the hospital remains the most transformative moment of my life. James and I stood over the bassinet, looking down at this tiny human with dark curls and solemn eyes, who would become the center of our universe. "Hello, Zoe," James whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We've been waiting for you." Parenthood changed everything, our schedules, our priorities, our relationship. The early months were a blur of midnight feedings, first smiles, and the kind of exhaustion I hadn't known was possible. James took a break from his usual writing schedule to be fully present, working on short stories during Zoe's naps instead of diving into a new novel. I arranged a flexible work situation, splitting my time between the office and home. Our apartment, once organized around our creative pursuits, transformed to accommodate toys, baby equipment, and the beautiful chaos that comes with a growing child. Zoe was nearly a year old when Mia and Adrian married in a small ceremony at his parents' home in Connecticut. Unlike her first wedding, this one felt genuine and grounded, a celebration of a relationship built on mutual respect rather than drama or forbidden attraction. "She seems happy," I observed to James as we watched Mia dance with her new husband, her face radiant with a contentment I hadn't seen in her before. "She is," James agreed, "and so are you." He glanced toward where my mother was proudly showing off Zoe to distant relatives. "We've all found our way, haven't we?" It was true. The painful chapter that had begun with betrayal had eventually led each of us to where we needed to be. Not through magic or fate, but through the hard work of growth, forgiveness, and courage to choose differently. Zoe was 2 when I received an unexpected email from Ethan, the first direct communication we'd had in nearly a decade. The message was brief but sincere, explaining that he had recently moved back to New York after several years in Chicago and was hoping to make amends with people he had hurt in the past. "I've done a lot of work on myself," he wrote. "Therapy, sobriety. Turns out I had issues there that I wasn't addressing, and just growing up. I understand if you don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that I deeply regret the pain I caused you. You deserved better." I showed the email to James, uncertain how to respond or whether I should respond at all. "What do you think?" I asked, watching his face carefully as he read. "I think," he said thoughtfully, "that forgiveness benefits the forgiver as much as the forgiven. But that doesn't mean you owe him a response if you don't want to give one." After consideration, I sent a simple reply thanking Ethan for his apology and wishing him well in his continued growth. It felt like closing a door that had been left slightly ajar all these years, not with anger, but with the quiet acknowledgement that some chapters are meant to end. Life continued its beautiful complexity. Zoe grew from toddler to preschooler, developing a personality that combined James's thoughtfulness with my determination. My career expanded to include launching a new imprint focused on diverse voices in fiction. James published his 5th novel to critical acclaim and began teaching a masterclass at Columbia once a semester. Maya and Adrian welcomed a son, making Zoe a cousin, a relationship that brought me unexpected joy as I watched the next generation form bonds untainted by our complicated past. My parents embraced their role as grandparents with enthusiasm, regularly taking both children for weekend sleepovers that gave all the adults much-needed breaks. 8 years into our marriage, with Zoe now 5 years old and thriving, James and I decided to pursue a second adoption. The process was familiar this time, though no less emotional. 6 months into our wait, we received a call about a 3-year-old boy named Leo, who needed a permanent home after multiple foster placements. "He's had a difficult start," our social worker explained, "but he's resilient and loving. We think you might be the right family for him." Meeting Leo broke and healed my heart simultaneously. A quiet child with watchful eyes and a hesitant smile, he carried the wariness of someone who had learned not to trust that good things would last. The transition wasn't easy. There were nightmares, behavioral challenges, and moments of testing that pushed us to our limits. But there were also breakthrough moments of connection that made everything worthwhile. The first time he called James Daddy, the morning he crawled into my lap with a book without being invited, his growing bond with Zoe, who took her role as big sister with remarkable seriousness. "Family isn't about biology," I told Leo one night as I tucked him in, months after he had come to live with us. "It's about who chooses to love you forever, no matter what." "Like you and Daddy and Zoe?" he asked, his brown eyes serious in the glow of his nightlight. "Exactly like that," I assured him. "We chose you, and we'll keep choosing you every single day." 10 years after my wedding to James, our family of 4 settled into a pattern that felt both ordinary and miraculous. Weekday mornings were a chaotic symphony of breakfast preparations, school lunch packing, and the search for perpetually missing shoes. Evenings brought homework supervision, dinner conversations where we each shared the best and hardest parts of our days, and bedtime stories, often original tales that James created featuring characters suspiciously similar to our children. Professionally, I had recently been offered the position of publishing director, a role that would give me more influence over the company's overall direction but would also demand more of my time and energy. The decision wasn't easy, particularly with Leo still needing extra support as he adjusted to kindergarten. "What do you think?" I asked James late one night after the children were asleep. "Be honest." He considered the question with the thoughtfulness I'd come to expect from him. "I think you'd be brilliant at it," he said finally. "And I think we can make it work as a family. The children are in school now. I can adjust my writing schedule to be more available for pickups and appointments." "Are you sure? Your new book deadline is important," he finished for me. "But not more important than this. We're partners, Liv. Your success is our success." His support meant everything. Not because I needed permission, but because I knew it came from a place of genuine belief in my abilities and commitment to our shared life. This was what real partnership looked like, making space for each other's dreams while holding the family at the center. The 10th anniversary of our wedding arrived on a perfect June day, much like the one when we had exchanged vows in the botanical garden. We had planned a small celebration, dinner with just my parents, Mia and Adrian and their son, and a few of our closest friends. That morning, James surprised me with a small box containing a necklace, a delicate gold pendant with 4 intertwined circles representing our family. "Happy anniversary," he said as he fastened it around my neck. 10 years of the best decision I ever made. Even with all the complications? I asked, thinking of the fertility struggles, the grief of losing his mother, the challenges of adoption and parenting. Especially with the complications, he replied, his hands resting on my shoulders. They're what make the story worth telling. Later that evening, after our guests had gone and the children were asleep, James and I sat on our small balcony with glasses of wine, looking out at the Brooklyn night. I ran into Ethan today, James said suddenly, at that coffee shop near Columbia. I looked at him in surprise. You never mentioned he was back in the city. I didn't know until today. He recognized me first. James took a sip of his wine. He asked about you, said he saw the announcement about your promotion in Publishers Weekly. What did you tell him? I asked, curious rather than concerned. The truth, that you're extraordinary at what you do, that we have 2 amazing children, that our life together is the best thing that's ever happened to me. James smiled slightly. He seemed genuinely happy for you, said something about how things work out as they should in the end. I considered this unexpected connection to my past. He's right, though not in the way most people mean it. Things don't work out because of fate or destiny. They work out because we make choices every day about who we want to be and what kind of life we want to build. James nodded, reaching for my hand. That's the secret, isn't it? Life isn't about finding the perfect path. It's about how we navigate the path we're on, especially the unexpected detours. As we sat in comfortable silence, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. 10 years earlier, I had walked down the aisle toward this thoughtful, brilliant man, still carrying the scars of betrayal, but choosing to believe in possibility again. Now, a decade later, those scars had faded into barely noticeable marks on a life rich with meaning, love, and purpose. The following week, Mia called with news that left me momentarily speechless. I saw Ethan yesterday, she said without preamble, at that new exhibition opening at MoMA. James mentioned he's back in the city, I replied, trying to gauge her tone. Was it awkward? Surprisingly not, she admitted. We actually had a good conversation. He's changed, more centered, less restless. He asked about you and James, about the kids. That's nice, I said, uncertain where this was leading. He told me something interesting, Mia continued. He said he always knew, even back then, that you and James would end up together. What? That's impossible. I didn't even know James then. Not literally, Mia clarified. He meant someone like James. Someone who matched your intelligence and depth. He said he felt inadequate with you sometimes, like he couldn't keep up. That's partly why he... She trailed off, still uncomfortable naming their betrayal directly. Why he turned to you, I finished for her not unkindly. Yes. She paused. It's strange to look back now and see how wrong we were for each other. Ethan and I mean. We hurt you terribly for something that wasn't even real or lasting. But it led us all here, I pointed out. You to Adrian, me to James, even Ethan to whatever growth he's experienced. If I could go back and change it, I wouldn't. Not anymore. Later, as guests began dispersing to their rooms, my sister Vanessa found me on the terrace overlooking the illuminated gardens. So this is what you've been doing while I've been fighting for the principal's office, she said, a hint of something like envy in her voice. We chose different paths, I replied, echoing her words from years ago. Both have value. She nodded slowly. I always thought you were running away from responsibility, but you were running towards something else entirely, weren't you? I was building a life that made sense to me, even if it didn't make sense to anyone else. Vanessa leaned against the stone balustrade. Did it hurt? All those years of us doubting you? I considered lying, then decided the evening had seen enough pretense. Yes, it hurt every time Dad suggested real estate wasn't a proper career. It hurt when Mom talked about your achievements but treated mine like temporary distractions. It hurt being the family cautionary tale instead of a success story. Vanessa looked away, guilty recognition in her profile. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. And I'm also incredibly impressed. This place is extraordinary. Thank you, Vanessa. That means a lot coming from you. As the evening wound down, I found myself alone with my parents in one of Rosewood's intimate sitting rooms. The weight of unspoken words hung between us until my father finally broke the silence. "I was wrong about you, Maya. Completely wrong." Coming from a man who prided himself on being right, this was a monumental admission. "You took risks I would never have had the courage to take," he continued. "And you succeeded beyond anything I could have imagined." My mother reached for my hand. "We were so afraid for you, living so far away, doing something we didn't understand. We thought you needed rescuing." "I didn't need rescuing, Mom. I needed support. I needed you to believe that I might know what was right for my own life, even if it looked nothing like yours." "And instead, we tried to fix what wasn't broken," my father acknowledged. "I'm sorry, Maya. Truly sorry." The apology I had longed for all these years finally arrived, and I found it meant both more and less than I had expected. More, because I could see the genuine regret in my father's eyes. Less, because somewhere along the way I had stopped needing their validation to believe in my own worth. "I know you wanted what you thought was best for me," I said finally. "But from now on, maybe you could just ask me what I need instead of assuming you know." My father nodded solemnly. "I think we can manage that." As they left for their rooms, my mother paused at the door. "You've built something remarkable here, Maya. Not just the building, but the life you've made. I hope someday you'll give us a proper tour of your home." "I'd like that," I replied. "Perhaps after the wedding." Alone in the quiet of Rosewood Manor, I wandered through the grand hall, after everyone had retired for the night. The revelation dinner had gone differently than I'd imagined. Not the vindictive triumph I had sometimes fantasized about during lonely nights in Singapore, but something more nuanced, more healing. I trailed my fingers along the mahogany paneling I had sourced from a sustainable forest in Indonesia, remembering the day it arrived. The local craftsman I'd hired had marveled at its quality, at my insistence on materials that matched the original 1891 construction. "You have an old soul," one of them had told me. "You understand that some things shouldn't be replaced, just restored with care." If only relationships could be restored as methodically as buildings. I climbed the hidden staircase to my private residence on the 3rd floor, the owner's suite that none of my family knew existed. Unlike the historically accurate public areas of Rosewood, my personal space blended antiques with modern comfort. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the moonlit gardens, while my collection of contemporary Asian art added bold color to the walls. Kicking off my heels, I sank into my favorite armchair and opened my laptop to review tomorrow's wedding preparations. Emma's ceremony would be held in the Rose Garden, followed by a reception in the grand ballroom, the space I had spent the most time and resources restoring. A text message illuminated my phone. "You were amazing tonight. Sleep well in your castle, princess. You've earned it." It was from Marco, my business partner and sometimes more in Singapore. He had been the one to encourage me to buy Rosewood when I doubted myself. "Castle's quiet without you," I texted back. "Wedding tomorrow. Full report after." Marco had been the first person to truly see my potential when I arrived in Singapore 8 years ago, fresh out of graduate school with big dreams and limited experience. While my family dismissed my international move as running away from real responsibility, Marco had recognized my eye for architectural preservation and offered me a junior position at his firm. "You have a gift," he had told me after my first successful project. "You see what buildings want to be, not just what they are." Under his mentorship, I had flourished, eventually becoming his partner in the business. And somewhere along the way, between late nights poring over blueprints and early mornings inspecting construction sites, our professional relationship had evolved into something deeper, though neither of us had been willing to fully define it. Marco understood my complicated relationship with my family in a way few others could. His own parents had disowned him when he left their family shipping business to pursue architecture. "Sometimes you have to disappoint the people you love to become the person you're meant to be," he often said. A soft knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to find Daniel, still in his formal wear but looking more relaxed now that the evening's main event was over. "Sorry to disturb you, Miss Chen, but I thought you might want to know that your cousin Emma is asking questions about the owner's residence. She seems quite determined to see where the, quote, mysterious owner lives." I smiled. Emma's always been curious. I suppose the cat's only partially out of the bag. Shall I arrange a private tour for the bride tomorrow morning, before the wedding preparations begin in earnest? I considered this. Yes, that would be nice. Just Emma, though. Tell her it's a special pre-wedding gift. After Daniel left, I moved to the window, gazing out at the property that represented everything I had worked for. The moonlight silvered the rose gardens and reflecting pool, creating a fairy tale landscape that had become the backdrop for so many couples' most important memories. Tomorrow it would be Emma's turn. My phone rang, my father. I hesitated before answering, unsure if I was ready for another emotional conversation. Maya, he began awkwardly. I hope I'm not calling too late. It's fine, Dad. Is everything okay? Yes. Your mother and I we were talking, and there's something I need to ask you. I braced myself. Go ahead. The expansion project you mentioned during dinner, adding the North Wing conference facilities. Is that something you're financing yourself? Of all the questions he could have asked, this surprised me. Yes, it's already budgeted. Why? He cleared his throat. I've been looking at your photo album. The restoration work is remarkable. It got me thinking about my retirement funds. They're just sitting in low-yield accounts. And if you're looking for investors for the expansion. I sat down, stunned. My fiscally conservative father was offering to invest in my business. Not because I needed the money, but because he finally believed in what I was building. That's unexpected, I managed. I know, he said, his voice softening. But maybe it's time I started believing in my daughter's vision instead of questioning it. Too many years wasted doing the latter. After we hung up, I felt lighter somehow, as if a weight I had carried for years had begun to dissolve. I slept deeply that night in my beautiful home, no longer haunted by the need to prove myself to my family. Morning arrived with the controlled chaos of a wedding day. From my window, I watched vendors arriving, setting up floral arrangements in the garden, arranging chairs for the ceremony. Everything was proceeding according to plan, overseen by Rosewood's experienced staff. I dressed casually for my private tour with Emma, selecting jeans and a simple blouse, a contrast to last night's formal revelation. Daniel escorted her to my private entrance at precisely 9 a.m. Her eyes widened as she realized where she was being taken. The owner's actual home? Maya, are you sure this is okay? I opened the door myself, enjoying her gasp of surprise. Considering I am the owner, yes, it's perfectly okay. Emma's delight as I showed her through my private residence was genuine. She marveled at the views, the art collection, the personal touches that made this space uniquely mine. I can't believe you've created all this, she said, running her hand along a silk wall covering I had brought back from Thailand. It's not just a business for you, is it? It's a passion. The best businesses always start with passion, I replied, leading her onto my private terrace overlooking the rose garden, where her ceremony would take place in just hours. Emma grew quiet, looking out at the workers arranging chairs and floral arches. I wish I had that. A clear passion, a vision for my life like you do. I was surprised. Emma had always seemed so content with her choices, following the expected path without question. I thought you loved your teaching job. I like it, she shrugged. But it doesn't consume me the way this place clearly consumes you. When you talk about Rosewood, you light up. I've never felt that way about anything except maybe Michael. Not everyone finds their passion in work, I offered. Some find it in relationships, in family. Maybe, she said, unconvinced. Or maybe some of us just never take the risks necessary to discover what we're truly passionate about. I recognized in her words the same doubts that had plagued me before I left for Singapore. The fear that a conventional life might be safer, but would leave some essential part of me unfulfilled. It's never too late, you know, I said gently. Michael supports your choices, doesn't he? She nodded. He's wonderful that way. Nothing like Uncle Russell, no offense. None taken, I laughed. Dad means well, but his vision of success has always been rather narrow. Until now, Emma pointed out. You should have seen his face last night after you left. He was showing everyone the restoration photos, bragging about his daughter, the property developer, like he'd believed in you all along. I smiled at the image. People can surprise you. Speaking of surprises, Emma said, her expression turning mischievous, are you ever going to tell me about the gorgeous man in these photos? She pointed to a framed picture on my bookshelf. Marco and me at the opening of our Singapore office, his arm casually around my shoulders, both of us laughing. That's Marco, my business partner. Just business? Emma raised an eyebrow. I hesitated. It's complicated. The best things usually are, she replied wisely. Is he coming to the wedding? No, he's overseeing a project in Kyoto. We take turns managing international sites. Emma studied the photo more closely. He looks at you like Michael looks at me. Just saying. Before I could respond, Daniel appeared at the terrace door. Ms. Chen, the florist needs your approval on a last-minute substitution for the ceremony arch. And Ms. Emma, your mother is looking for you. Something about your hair appointment. As Emma hurried off to her bridal preparations, promising to keep my secret lair to herself, I turned my attention back to the business of running Rosewood. The morning flew by in a flurry of decisions and oversight, ensuring that every detail of my cousin's wedding would be perfect. Around noon, I returned to my guest suite to prepare for the ceremony, deliberately maintaining the fiction that I was staying there rather than in my owner's residence. As I was arranging my hair, a knock at the door revealed my mother, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Maya, do you have a moment? I invited her in, watching as she took in the details of the room with new eyes, no doubt calculating its nightly rate, and marveling that her daughter owned not just this suite but the entire property. You look lovely, she said, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. That color suits you. Thank you, I replied, securing another hairpin. Is everything okay? She twisted her wedding ring nervously. I've been thinking about what you said last night, about needing support, not rescue. I realized I don't even know what supporting you would look like. I've spent so many years worrying about you that I never stopped to ask what you actually needed from me. Her honesty caught me off guard. That's a very fair question. So I'm asking now, she said simply. What do you need from me, Maya? I put down my hairbrush, turning to face her fully. I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing, even when it looks nothing like what you would do. I need you to ask about my projects with real interest, not just concern about when I'll settle down. And sometimes, I just need you to be proud of me for what I've actually accomplished, not what you wish I would accomplish instead. My mother nodded slowly, absorbing my words. I can try to do that. It won't be easy. Worrying is what mothers do, but I can try. She paused, then added, I am proud of you, Maya. What you've done here is extraordinary. I just didn't understand it until I could see it with my own eyes. I can't believe you've created all this, she said, running her hand along a silk wall covering I had brought back from Thailand. It's not just a business for you, is it? It's a passion. The best businesses always start with passion, I replied, leading her onto my private terrace overlooking the rose garden, where her ceremony would take place in just hours. Emma grew quiet, looking out at the workers arranging chairs and floral arches. I wish I had that. A clear passion, a vision for my life like you do. I was surprised. Emma had always seemed so content with her choices, following the expected path without question. I thought you loved your teaching job. I like it, she shrugged. But it doesn't consume me the way this place clearly consumes you. When you talk about Rosewood, you light up. I've never felt that way about anything except maybe Michael. Not everyone finds their passion in work, I offered. Some find it in relationships, in family. Maybe, she said, unconvinced. Or maybe some of us just never take the risks necessary to discover what we're truly passionate about. I recognized in her words the same doubts that had plagued me before I left for Singapore. The fear that a conventional life might be safer, but would leave some essential part of me unfulfilled. It's never too late, you know, I said gently. Michael supports your choices, doesn't he? She nodded. He's wonderful that way. Nothing like Uncle Russell, no offense. None taken, I laughed. Dad means well, but his vision of success has always been rather narrow. Until now, Emma pointed out. You should have seen his face last night after you left. He was showing everyone the restoration photos, bragging about his daughter, the property developer, like he'd believed in you all along. I smiled at the image. People can surprise you. Speaking of surprises, Emma said, her expression turning mischievous, are you ever going to tell me about the gorgeous man in these photos? She pointed to a framed picture on my bookshelf. Marco and me at the opening of our Singapore office, his arm casually around my shoulders, both of us laughing. That's Marco, my business partner. Just business? Emma raised an eyebrow. I hesitated. It's complicated. The best things usually are, she replied wisely. Is he coming to the wedding? No, he's overseeing a project in Kyoto. We take turns managing international sites. Emma studied the photo more closely. He looks at you like Michael looks at me. Just saying. Before I could respond, Daniel appeared at the terrace door. Ms. Chen, the florist needs your approval on a last-minute substitution for the ceremony arch. And Ms. Emma, your mother is looking for you. Something about your hair appointment. As Emma hurried off to her bridal preparations, promising to keep my secret lair to herself, I turned my attention back to the business of running Rosewood. The morning flew by in a flurry of decisions and oversight, ensuring that every detail of my cousin's wedding would be perfect. Around noon, I returned to my guest suite to prepare for the ceremony, deliberately maintaining the fiction that I was staying there rather than in my owner's residence. As I was arranging my hair, a knock at the door revealed my mother, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Maya, do you have a moment? I invited her in, watching as she took in the details of the room with new eyes, no doubt calculating its nightly rate, and marveling that her daughter owned not just this suite but the entire property. You look lovely, she said, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. That color suits you. Thank you, I replied, securing another hairpin. Is everything okay? She twisted her wedding ring nervously. I've been thinking about what you said last night, about needing support, not rescue. I realized I don't even know what supporting you would look like. I've spent so many years worrying about you that I never stopped to ask what you actually needed from me. Her honesty caught me off guard. That's a very fair question. So I'm asking now, she said simply. What do you need from me, Maya? I put down my hairbrush, turning to face her fully. I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing, even when it looks nothing like what you would do. I need you to ask about my projects with real interest, not just concern about when I'll settle down. And sometimes, I just need you to be proud of me for what I've actually accomplished, not what you wish I would accomplish instead. My mother nodded slowly, absorbing my words. I can try to do that. It won't be easy. Worrying is what mothers do, but I can try. She paused, then added, I am proud of you, Maya. What you've done here is extraordinary. I just didn't understand it until I could see it with my own eyes. Vanessa nodded, watching the staff efficiently arrange the midnight snack buffet. I've been thinking about what you said, about different paths having value. I always assumed my path was inherently more stable, more sensible than yours. It is more stable, I acknowledged. But stability isn't the only measure of success. No, she agreed. It isn't. She hesitated, then added, Kevin and I have been talking about opening a small educational consulting business, something we could build together outside the school system. I always dismissed it as too risky, but seeing what you've created here. I squeezed her arm encouragingly. You'd be amazing at that. And I happen to know a thing or two about starting a business, if you ever want advice. For the first time in years, Vanessa and I shared a genuine moment of sisterly connection, unfiltered by competition or familial expectations. It felt like the beginning of a new relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than comparison. As the wedding festivities finally concluded, I stood on the grand staircase watching the last guests depart. Emma and Michael had already left for their honeymoon suite, the staff was quietly beginning cleanup, and Rosewood was settling into the peaceful quiet of a night well spent. My father approached, looking tired but content. Your mother and I are heading up. Amazing event, Maya. Truly exceptional. Thank you, Dad. He paused, seeming to struggle with something. I kept thinking today about all the milestones in your career that we missed. All the times you tried to share your successes with us, and we just couldn't see them. I'm sorry for that. It's okay, Dad. We're here now. Yes, he agreed, looking around at the magnificent space that was undeniably mine. We are. As my parents headed to their guest suite, I made one final round of the property, checking in with the night staff, ensuring all was secure. Then, instead of returning to my guest room, I took the hidden staircase up to my true home within Rosewood. Standing at my window, looking out over the moonlit grounds, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From the graduate student with big dreams to the international developer my family had finally recognized, each step had been necessary, even the painful ones of doubt and dismissal. My phone buzzed with a text from Marco. Booked my flight. See you in 3 days. I smiled, imagining him here at Rosewood, the two most significant parts of my life finally intersecting. Whatever came next, I would face it knowing that I had built not just a successful business, but a life authentic to who I truly was, with or without my family's approval. The manor settled around me, creaking gently as old buildings do. In its sounds, I heard not just history but possibility, the continued evolution of a structure that had weathered time and neglect to emerge more beautiful than before. Much like the relationships I was beginning to rebuild, one honest conversation at a time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities. But tonight, in the quietude of achievement, I allowed myself to simply be present in the moment of recognition, not just from my family, but from myself. I had become exactly who I was meant to be, even when no one else could see it. And that, perhaps, was the greatest success of all. The morning after Emma's wedding dawned bright and clear, golden sunlight streaming through the east windows of my private suite. I had slept soundly for the first time in years when staying near my family, unburdened by the weight of secrets and unmet expectations. Wrapped in my silk robe, I sipped coffee on my terrace, watching the grounds crew quietly restoring the garden after yesterday's festivities. There was something profoundly satisfying about the rhythm of Rosewood, celebration followed by renewal, over and over again. My phone chimed with a message from Daniel. Breakfast for the remaining guests is set up in the conservatory. Your parents are asking if you'll be joining them. Tell them I'll be down in 30 minutes, I replied, setting aside my coffee to prepare for the day. I deliberately selected casual but elegant attire, linen trousers and a silk blouse that spoke of relaxed confidence. No more pretending to be less successful than I was. No more downplaying my achievements to make others comfortable. The woman who descended the grand staircase to the conservatory was the real Maya Chen, property developer, business owner, visionary. The glass-walled conservatory glowed with morning light, highlighting the collection of rare orchids I had sourced from botanical gardens around the world. Several wedding guests were already enjoying breakfast, including my parents, who sat at a corner table near the koi pond I had installed during the restoration. Good morning, I greeted them, accepting a cup of coffee from a passing server who nodded respectfully. Maya, this room is extraordinary, my mother said, gesturing to the soaring glass ceiling and lush plantings. Was it part of the original estate? The structure was, I explained, pleased by her genuine interest. But it had been abandoned for decades, used for storage. I had the ironwork restored by artisans who specialize in Victorian conservatories, and then created this indoor garden. My father shook his head in admiration. The attention to detail throughout this place is remarkable. Your mother and I were just saying that we'd like a proper tour before we leave. If you have time, of course. I'd love to show you around, I replied, surprised and touched by their request. There are many areas guests don't typically see. The original wine cellars, the library restoration, the historical archives we've established. As we enjoyed breakfast, various family members stopped by our table, many seeing me with new eyes after the revelation. Cousin Tyler slid into an empty chair with a grin. So, property mogul? He teased. Any chance you're hiring? I'm starting to think insurance isn't my life's calling after all. I laughed. Actually, we're expanding our American operations. I could use someone to manage client relations for potential new venue bookings. Someone who understands both hospitality and business. Tyler's expression shifted from joking to serious. Wait, really? You'd consider me? I don't have experience in high-end properties. But you understand people, I pointed out, and you've always had an eye for quality. The technical aspects can be learned. My father watched this exchange with interest. You're expanding the business here in Pennsylvania? I nodded. Rosewood is just the beginning. There's growing demand for historically significant venues for events and destination experiences. I'm looking at several promising properties within a 100-mile radius. That's substantial, my father said, clearly recalculating his understanding of the scale of my business. How many people do you employ now? Between Singapore and here, about 60 full-time staff and another 40 seasonal. That will likely double if the expansion goes as planned. My mother nearly choked on her tea. 60 employees? Maya, that's not just a business, that's a corporation. I smiled. We're still boutique by industry standards, but yes, we've grown significantly in the past few years. Before they could respond, Daniel approached our table. Ms. Chen, I apologize for the interruption, but Mr. Zhao from the Preservation Society is on the phone. He's particularly interested in discussing the Davidson estate opportunity. This was a potential new acquisition I had been exploring, a historic property similar to Rosewood, but closer to Philadelphia. Tell him I'll call back within the hour. Thank you, Daniel. As Daniel departed, my father leaned forward. The Davidson estate? Alexander Davidson's old summer home? That's been sitting empty for years. It has tremendous potential, I explained. Similar architectural significance to Rosewood, but with better proximity to the city for corporate retreats and destination weddings. My father looked genuinely impressed. That's prime real estate. The purchase price alone must be substantial, I finished for him. But the return on investment would justify it, based on our success with Rosewood. He nodded slowly, processing this information. Your business degree didn't go to waste after all, just not in the way I expected. It was as close to an admission of misjudgment as my father was likely to make, and I accepted it with a smile. Different path, same fundamentals. After breakfast, I excused myself to return the business call while my parents prepared for their departure. In my office, I finalized arrangements to view the Davidson property later that week, feeling energized by the expansion possibilities. When I emerged, I found Daniel waiting in the hallway. Your parents are ready for the tour whenever you are, he informed me. And there's one other matter. A delivery arrived for you this morning. He handed me a small package with Singapore postage. Inside was a vintage compass in a wooden case, beautifully restored. The note read simply, "For the woman who always finds her true north. See you soon. Marco." I smiled, tucking the compass into my pocket before heading to meet my parents in the grand foyer. The gesture was so typically Marco, thoughtful, meaningful, with layers of significance. He had given me my first antique compass when we completed our first project together, telling me I had an unerring sense of direction, not just geographically but in life. My parents were waiting by the original Rosewood estate map I had framed and mounted in the entryway. My father was studying it with the concentrated interest of someone seeing familiar territory through new eyes. Ready for the grand tour? I asked, approaching them. For the next 2 hours, I guided them through Rosewood's public spaces and private corners alike, explaining the challenges and triumphs of the restoration process. I showed them crumbling plasterwork transformed into elegant moldings, water-damaged floors restored to gleaming parquet, and gardens revitalized with historically accurate plantings. In the library, my father paused before the wall of architectural books I had collected over the years. You really have immersed yourself in this world, he observed, running his fingers along the spines of rare volumes on historical preservation. It's not just a business for me, I explained. It's a passion, preserving beautiful spaces that might otherwise be lost, giving them new life and purpose. I can see that now, he acknowledged. I always thought your interest in old buildings was just a phase, something you'd outgrow in favor of more practical pursuits. Some passions only deepen with time, I replied. Just because something isn't practical in the conventional sense doesn't mean it can't become a viable life's work. As we continued the tour, my mother grew increasingly animated, asking questions about design choices and historical details. In the grand ballroom, she gasped at the restored ceiling mural I had commissioned from an Italian artist who specialized in historical reproductions. "This is museum quality," she marveled. "How did you even find someone who could do this work?" "Research, persistence, and a willingness to look beyond the obvious solutions," I replied. "The same approach that built this entire business." The pride in her eyes was unmistakable, and all the more meaningful for being based on genuine understanding rather than maternal obligation. Our final stop was the Rose Garden, now restored to its serene state after yesterday's wedding. I had saved this space for last because it held special significance for me. It had been the first area I tackled in the restoration, the proof of concept that convinced me the entire project was viable. "When I first saw this garden, it was completely overgrown," I explained, gesturing to the meticulously maintained roses that now bloomed in geometric patterns around a central fountain. You couldn't even tell there was a design beneath the chaos. But I found the original landscape plans in the local historical society archives and realized what it could be again. My father nodded thoughtfully. "A metaphor for the entire project, I suppose. Seeing potential where others saw only decay." "Exactly," I smiled, surprised and touched by his insight. "Sometimes the most valuable things are hidden beneath years of neglect. Like talents and dreams," my mother added quietly. "I wonder how many people never discover their true capabilities because no one, including themselves, takes the time to look beneath the surface." Her words hung in the air between us, laden with the recognition of how close they had come to doing exactly that with me. Dismissing my passion as impractical, without seeing the potential it held. As we completed the tour, returning to the main entrance where their luggage awaited, my father cleared his throat awkwardly. "Maya, your mother and I have been talking. We'd like to come back for a longer visit, perhaps see more of your operation. Maybe even visit your Singapore office someday, if that wouldn't be an imposition." The request took me by surprise. My parents had never shown interest in visiting me abroad before. "I'd like that," I said sincerely, "both here and in Singapore." "And," my mother added, "we'd love for you to speak at your father's retirement ceremony next month. The school is honoring his 30 years of teaching, and, well, we're proud of both our daughters. We'd like both of you to be part of it." The invitation was more than a social courtesy. It was an acknowledgement of my place in the family narrative, my achievements worthy of recognition alongside my sister's more conventional success. I found myself unexpectedly moved. "I'd be honored," I replied. "Just send me the details." As we said our goodbyes, the embraces were warmer, more genuine than they had been in years. No longer shadowed by disappointment or misunderstanding, but illuminated by new respect and the beginning of true acceptance. After my parents departed, I returned to my office to tackle the administrative tasks that had accumulated during the wedding weekend. Daniel appeared in the doorway with a stack of messages and inquiries. "The wedding has generated significant interest," he reported. 3 potential clients have requested tours this week, all specifically mentioning that they heard about us from wedding guests. And Architectural Digest has requested a follow-up feature on the owner behind Rosewood's Renaissance. I smiled at the irony. For years, I had maintained a low profile, allowing Rosewood to shine while I remained in the background. Now it seemed, both the property and its owner would step into the spotlight together. "Schedule the tours," I instructed. "And tell Architectural Digest I'm open to discussing a feature." It's time for Rosewood's complete story to be told. As Daniel departed, I turned to the window, watching the last of the wedding guests departing down the tree-lined drive. The revelation that had begun with my family was expanding outward, rippling through social circles and professional networks. The quiet satisfaction of this recognition was sweeter than I had imagined. not because I needed external validation, but because it meant I could now fully integrate the various aspects of my life that had remained separate for too long. My phone rang. Vanessa. Hey, she greeted me. We just got home. I can't stop thinking about our conversation last night, about the educational consulting business. Have you made any decisions? I asked, hearing a new energy in her voice. Actually, yes. Kevin and I stayed up half the night talking about it. We're gonna start small, moonlighting while keeping our teaching positions for stability. But we're doing it. Taking the leap. That's wonderful, Vanessa. What changed your mind? She laughed softly. You did. Or rather, seeing what you've built by following your passion instead of the safe path. It made me realize I've been using stability as an excuse to avoid taking risks, but some risks are worth taking. They absolutely are, I agreed, and I meant what I said about offering advice if you need it. Actually, she hesitated, I was hoping for more than advice. Would you consider being an advisor for our business plan? You have experience I can only dream of. It was the first time in our adult lives that Vanessa had approached me as a mentor, rather than a competitor or cautionary tale. The shift in our dynamic was profound, a rebalancing that allowed us both to occupy positions of strength in different domains. I'd be happy to, I replied. Send me what you have so far, and we can set up a call next week to discuss. After we hung up, I found myself reflecting on how completely the weekend had transformed my family relationships. The painful dismissal that had characterized our interactions for years had begun to dissolve, replaced by something that felt like genuine respect and even admiration. It wasn't perfect. Decades of misunderstanding couldn't be erased in a single weekend, but it was a beginning. As evening approached, I wandered through the now quiet halls of Rosewood, appreciating the peace that settled over the property between events. In the grand entryway, I paused before a newly installed piece, a commissioned stained glass window depicting the estate as it appeared in 1891 alongside its current restoration. Light filtered through the colored glass, casting jewel-toned patterns across the marble floor. The window represented my vision for Rosewood perfectly, honoring its past while embracing its present, neither trapped in history nor carelessly modern. It was a balance I had fought to maintain throughout the restoration, often against the advice of contractors who pushed for easier, less authentic solutions. Standing your ground when everyone else thinks you're wrong. That's the hardest part of leadership, Marco had told me once when I was fighting with a contractor about handcrafted moldings versus cheaper reproductions. But it's also the only way to create something truly extraordinary. His words had sustained me through many difficult decisions, both professional and personal. Standing my ground with my family had been infinitely harder than any contractor dispute, but ultimately more rewarding. The compass in my pocket seemed to grow warmer, a tangible reminder that I had always known my true direction, even when others couldn't see it. In 3 days, Marco would arrive, and another chapter would begin, the integration of my personal happiness with my professional success, no longer compartmentalized by geography or family expectations. As darkness fell, I climbed to my private residence, passing the framed newspaper article about Rosewood's grand reopening that hung in my hallway. The headline read, "Historic Estate Reborn, Pennsylvania's New Premier Destination." The article praised the meticulous restoration but mentioned the owner only in passing as, quote, a visionary developer with international experience. My deliberate anonymity had served its purpose at the time, allowing me to build Rosewood's reputation on its own merits rather than my personal story. But stories, like buildings, evolved. What began as a private triumph was becoming a public testament to perseverance and vision. Perhaps my journey could inspire others facing similar dismissal of their dreams, showing that validation often comes not from convincing skeptics, but from proving them irrelevant through undeniable success. I stepped onto my terrace, gazing out at the silhouette of Rosewood against the night sky. The estate had become not just my greatest professional achievement, but a symbol of personal vindication. Tangible proof that following your own path, however unconventional, could lead to extraordinary places. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. Serious about that job offer? Because I just gave 2 weeks' notice at the insurance company. Ready to join Team Maya? I smiled, typing back. Completely serious. Welcome aboard. Life's too short for jobs that don't ignite your passion. His response came quickly. Thanks for seeing potential in me that no one else did, including myself. His words struck a chord. How many people went through life with talents unrecognized, potential untapped, because no one, including themselves, believed in possibilities beyond the conventional path? My own journey had nearly been derailed by such limited thinking. I thought about the Davidson estate I would be visiting later in the week. Another neglected property with hidden potential, waiting for someone to see beyond its current state to what it could become. Perhaps that was my true gift. Seeing the beauty and possibility beneath the surface, whether in buildings or people. The night air carried the scent of roses from the garden below, a reminder of cycles of growth and renewal. Just as I had restored Rosewood's gardens from overgrown chaos to structured beauty, I was now restoring relationships long tangled by misunderstanding and judgment. Some transformations happened quickly. The shock on my family's faces when they learned I owned Rosewood had changed their perception in an instant. Others would take time. The deeper rebuilding of trust and mutual respect with my parents, the evolution of my relationship with Vanessa from competition to collaboration, the integration of Marco into my family life. But all were possible now that the foundation had been laid, the truth revealed, the pretense abandoned. Like any good restoration, it began with stripping away the accumulated layers of misunderstanding to reveal the original structure beneath, then rebuilding with authenticity and purpose. As stars appeared above Rosewood, I took out my phone and composed a message to Marco. Counting the days until you're here. Rosewood is waiting to meet you. So is my family. His reply came moments later. 3 days. Then no more oceans between us. No more separate lives. I smiled, tucking the phone away and gazing out at my beautiful estate. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for growth. But tonight, I savored the knowledge that I had created something lasting and meaningful, not just in the physical restoration of Rosewood, but in the reclamation of my authentic self. The path less traveled had led me here, to this moment of quiet triumph. Not because I had proven my worth to those who doubted me, but because I had never stopped believing in my own vision, even when no one else could see it. That, perhaps, was the most valuable lesson of all, that true validation comes not from external approval, but from the courage to pursue your own definition of success, whatever form it may take. 3 months later, I stood in the grand ballroom of the Davidson estate, watching as workers carefully restored the original chandelier, a magnificent piece that had been dismantled and stored in the property's carriage house for decades. The afternoon sunlight streamed through newly cleaned windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air as the restoration team worked. The wiring will be completely modernized while maintaining the historical appearance, explained Sophia, the head of restoration I had hired from a prestigious New York firm. Just like we did at Rosewood. I nodded approvingly. The chandelier is the focal point of this room. When it's lit for the first time in 30 years, I want it to take people's breath away. The Davidson estate had become my newest project, a magnificent Georgian revival mansion on 20 acres just outside Philadelphia. Like Rosewood, it had fallen into disrepair, its grandeur faded but not forgotten. Unlike Rosewood, I had approached this project with full confidence from the beginning. Backed by a team that believed in my vision, and a family that now understood my passion. My phone buzzed with a message from Marco. Meeting with investors just finished. Full funding approved for the Singapore expansion. Celebrating tonight? I smiled, typing back. Absolutely. My place at 7. I'm bringing home the original floor plans we found in the Davidson library. Wait until you see the ballroom specifications. Marco had extended his initial visit to Pennsylvania into a permanent relocation, establishing our American headquarters while maintaining oversight of our Asian operations through quarterly visits to Singapore. The transition had been surprisingly seamless, both professionally and personally. The complicated relationship we had danced around for years had simplified into something clear and committed once we removed the geographic barriers between us. Ms. Chen? Sophia's voice pulled me back to the present. The Historical Commission representative is here to discuss the exterior paint analysis. I tucked my phone away and turned my attention back to the work at hand. This was the part of restoration I loved most. The detective work of uncovering a building's original character, the painstaking research to ensure authenticity in every detail. The Davidson estate was revealing its secrets to us layer by layer, each discovery informing our approach to bringing it back to life. 2 hours later, after finalizing the exterior color scheme based on paint samples from 1886, I headed back to Rosewood. The 20-minute drive between properties gave me time to reflect on how dramatically my life had changed in just 3 months. The revelation at Emma's wedding had set in motion a cascade of transformations, both professional and personal. Architectural Digest had published a feature on the visionary behind Rosewood's Renaissance, bringing a flood of new business opportunities. I had hired Tyler to manage client relations, and his natural charm and attention to detail had already secured 3 major events for the upcoming season. More significantly, my relationship with my family had evolved in ways I never imagined possible. My father had not only invested in the Davidson restoration, but had become actively involved in researching the property's history, leveraging his connections in the local community to uncover original documents and photographs. My mother had surprised everyone by launching a garden volunteer program at Rosewood, leading tours of the historic plantings and sharing the stories behind their restoration. Even Vanessa and I had found a new equilibrium. Her educational consulting business was taking shape with my guidance, focusing on experiential learning programs hosted at historic properties, including Rosewood and soon the Davidson estate. Our complementary skills had transformed our relationship from implicit competition to explicit collaboration, strengthening both our businesses and our sisterly bond. As I pulled into Rosewood's private drive, I noticed a familiar car parked near the main entrance. My parents had arrived early for our weekly family dinner. These gatherings had become a new tradition, a time to share updates and ideas in an atmosphere of mutual respect that would have been unimaginable before the revelation, as we now called it. Inside, I found my parents in the library with Marco, examining a set of architectural drawings spread across the large oak table. "Maya," my father called, looking up with enthusiasm. "Marco's been showing us the plans for the Singapore Heritage Hotel. The integration of modern amenities within the colonial structure is brilliant." Marco greeted me with a warm smile and a quick kiss. "Your father has some excellent suggestions for the courtyard design." His understanding of flow and functionality is impressive. The easy rapport between Marco and my parents had been yet another pleasant surprise. Far from the resistance I had feared, they had welcomed him with genuine interest, quickly recognizing the depth of his expertise and the authenticity of his connection to me. "I hope you don't mind that we started without you," my mother said, approaching with a glass of wine from my favorite vintage, another sign of her newfound attentiveness to my preferences. We got caught up in discussing the possibilities. "Not at all," I replied, accepting the glass. "It's good to see you so engaged with the projects." My father rolled up one of the drawings carefully. "I never understood before the creativity involved in what you do. I always thought of real estate as merely transactional, but this..." He gestured to the plans. "This is a form of art. Preserving history while creating something new." His words reflected a profound shift in perspective, one that had gradually unfolded since the wedding revelation. What began as shocked recognition of my financial success had deepened into genuine appreciation for the craftsmanship and vision underlying that success. "Speaking of art," my mother interjected, "wait until you see what arrived today." She led me to the conservatory, where a striking bronze sculpture now stood beside the koi pond, a modern piece by a Singaporean artist I had long admired. "It's an early anniversary gift," Marco explained, following us into the sunlit space. "1 year since you purchased Rosewood." I circled the sculpture, admiring how the contemporary form complemented the Victorian architecture of the conservatory. Another successful blending of past and present, the design philosophy that defined both my professional and personal aesthetic. "It's perfect," I told him, genuinely moved by the thoughtfulness of the gift. A reminder of where we started, and how far we've come. Dinner that evening was filled with animated conversation about both the Davidson restoration and Vanessa's educational program, which would launch its first workshop the following month. My father, now fully retired from teaching, had agreed to lead a session on the economic history of the region, drawing connections between historical industries and the architectural legacy they left behind. "I've been researching the original Davidson family," he told us excitedly. "Did you know they made their fortune in textiles during the Industrial Revolution? There are fascinating parallels between their business innovation and what you two are doing with historical properties." My mother nodded enthusiastically. "We found photographs of the family in the Historical Society archives, including several showing the gardens in their original state. I've made copies for your landscape designer. Their eagerness to contribute to my work, to add value rather than question its worth, still surprised me sometimes." The transition from doubters to champions had not happened overnight, but through a series of small moments of engagement and understanding that accumulated into genuine respect. "By the way," my father added, setting down his fork, "I ran into Jonathan Lewis yesterday. You remember him, the bank manager I tried to set you up with at Emma's wedding?" I suppressed a smile, exchanging a glance with Marco. "I remember." "Well," my father continued, looking slightly sheepish, "he mentioned he's refinancing his house. I may have suggested he look into hosting his daughter's Sweet 16 at Rosewood instead of the country club. Told him my daughter could offer a special rate." Marco laughed. "From matchmaking to marketing. Quite a pivot, Russell." My father shrugged good-naturedly. "I'm learning to support Maya's success on her terms, not mine. Better late than never, right?" After dinner, as my parents prepared to leave, my mother pulled me aside. "I've been meaning to tell you something," she said, her expression unusually serious. "I found my old journals recently, from when you were in high school and talking about studying architecture. Do you know what I wrote back then?" I shook my head, curious. "I wrote that I was worried about you pursuing such a competitive field because I didn't think you could handle rejection." She looked down, then met my eyes directly. "I underestimated your resilience, Maya. You didn't just handle rejection. You proved it irrelevant. I'm sorry I didn't see your strength sooner." Her words touched me deeply, not just the apology, but the recognition of the quality that had ultimately defined my success. Not talent or vision alone, but the resilience to pursue that vision, despite dismissal and doubt. "Thank you for telling me that," I said softly. "It means a lot." After my parents departed, Marco and I retreated to the terrace with glasses of cognac, enjoying the mild spring evening. The gardens below were beginning to bloom, the earliest roses opening alongside beds of tulips and hyacinth. "Your parents have come a long way," Marco observed. "I remember how worried you were about them meeting me, worried they'd dismiss our relationship as casually as they dismissed your career." I nodded, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. "They're trying. Really trying. That's more than I expected 3 months ago." "And what about you?" he asked, his expression thoughtful. "Has getting their approval changed anything for you?" The question deserved careful consideration. Had external validation altered my internal sense of worth? Had their newfound respect added something essential to my success? "It hasn't changed what I've built or who I am," I said finally. "But it has changed how complete it feels. Like finding the last piece of a puzzle you didn't realize was missing." Marco nodded, understanding. "Family recognition isn't necessary for success, but it adds a certain sweetness to it." "Exactly," I agreed. "And there's something powerful about being seen clearly by the people who have known you longest, even if they're seeing you clearly for the first time." We fell silent, contemplating the garden and the journey that had brought us to this moment of contentment. The path had not been direct or easy, but every challenge and disappointment had shaped the ultimate destination in necessary ways. My phone chimed with a message from Tyler. "Just confirmed Davidson's first booking, a corporate retreat for that tech company you met in Singapore. They're thrilled to be the inaugural event. Contract details coming tomorrow." I showed the message to Marco, who raised his glass in a toast. "To new beginnings in old places. And to people who see potential where others see only problems," I added, thinking of Tyler's transformation from discontented insurance employee to enthusiastic venue manager. Later that evening, as we reviewed the week's progress on the Davidson restoration, Marco paused over a photograph of the estate's dilapidated east wing. "You know what I love most about our work," he mused, "not just preserving history, but giving it new purpose. These buildings were created for a world that no longer exists, but we find ways to make them relevant again without sacrificing their character." His observation struck me as applicable beyond architecture. My family relationships, too, had been built for a different era, constructed around expectations and definitions of success that had become obsolete. Rather than abandoning these connections, I had found a way to restore them with new understanding while honoring their original foundation. "That reminds me," I said, pulling out my tablet. "I've been thinking about the Davidson Ballroom, not just as an event space, but as a community resource. What if we partnered with local schools for historical education programs, bringing students in to learn about architecture, preservation, the economic history of the region?" Marco's eyes lit up. "Combining Vanessa's educational expertise with our restoration work. I like it. We could develop a curriculum that uses the building itself as a teaching tool." We spent the next hour sketching ideas, our excitement building with each possibility. This was what had drawn us together initially, the shared ability to see beyond what was to what could be, to imagine new life for forgotten spaces. The following morning, I arrived at the Davidson estate early, eager to check on the chandelier installation before meeting with the Historical Commission. As I walked through the partially restored rooms, I marveled at the transformation already underway. Walls that had been crumbling were now solid and smooth, waiting for the historically accurate paint colors we had selected. Floors that had rotted through were replaced with carefully matched hardwoods, preserving the original patterns. In the ballroom, workers were preparing to hoist the restored chandelier into position. I stood back, watching as the massive fixture was carefully raised toward the ornate ceiling medallion that had been meticulously rebuilt by master craftsmen. "Moment of truth," Sophia murmured beside me. "Once it's in place, we'll know if all our measurements and restorations aligned correctly." I held my breath as the chandelier ascended, its crystal pendants catching the morning light. When it finally settled into position, locking into the ceiling mount with a satisfying click, a spontaneous round of applause broke out among the workers. "Perfect," I breathed, taking in the way the piece transformed the entire room, becoming the crowning jewel it was always meant to be. Sophia smiled. "This is why we do what we do, isn't it? For moments like this." I nodded, unable to tear my eyes away from the spectacle. The chandelier's restoration embodied everything I loved about my work. The painstaking attention to detail, the respect for original craftsmanship, the moment when forgotten beauty returned to its rightful prominence. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "Found more Davidson family history at the library. They hosted community concerts in that ballroom every summer. Thought you might want to revive the tradition." I smiled at her suggestion, so perfectly aligned with the ideas Marco and I had discussed the night before. Another piece falling into place, another connection strengthening. After finishing at Davidson, I drove to Rosewood for a meeting with Vanessa about her educational program. I found her in the library, surrounded by curriculum materials and historical documents. "Maya," she greeted me enthusiastically, "I think we've cracked it. The program connects local history, architectural preservation, and STEM principles through hands-on activities. Students will actually participate in mini restoration projects." I reviewed her materials, impressed by the thoughtful integration of educational standards with authentic preservation experiences. "This is excellent, Vanessa, truly innovative." She beamed at the praise. "It's amazing what happens when you combine different perspectives, isn't it? Your restoration expertise, my educational background. Together they've created something neither of us could have developed alone." Her observation resonated deeply. For years, our family had viewed success through a single lens, measuring achievements against a narrow standard. Now we were discovering the power of diverse approaches, of combining different strengths toward shared goals. "Speaking of different perspectives," Vanessa continued, "Dad's been working on a financial literacy component that uses historical property ledgers to teach economic concepts. He's completely reinvented himself in retirement." I smiled, thinking of our father's transformation from rigid traditionalist to enthusiastic contributor. He's finding new ways to share his knowledge. That's a kind of restoration too, isn't it? Giving established expertise new relevance. The afternoon flew by as we refined the educational program, our collaboration effortless, in a way that would have seemed impossible just months ago. When we finally wrapped up, the sun was setting over Rosewood's gardens, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. "I never thought we'd be working together like this," Vanessa admitted as we walked toward the main entrance. "For so long, it felt like we were on opposing teams. Your unconventional path versus my traditional one. And now?" I prompted. She smiled. "Now I see they're just different routes to the same destination, creating something meaningful, something that lasts." After Vanessa left, I wandered through Rosewood's quiet halls, reflecting on her words. The estate after hours had a peaceful presence, a sense of timeless dignity that had survived decades of neglect to emerge, renewed but unchanged in its essential character. In the grand foyer, I paused before the estate map, tracing the outline of the property with my finger. Every inch represented challenges overcome, doubts defeated, vision vindicated. But more than a professional triumph, Rosewood had become the catalyst for personal restoration, the tangible proof that forced my family to see me clearly at last. My phone rang. Marco, calling from his meeting in Philadelphia. "Great news," he announced without preamble. "The preservation grant came through for Davidson. Full funding for the external restoration." "That's wonderful," I replied, genuinely excited. The grant would allow us to restore architectural details we might otherwise have had to simplify for budget reasons. "There's more," he continued. "The grant committee specifically mentioned your work at Rosewood as a factor in their decision. Your reputation for authentic restoration tipped the scales in our favor." Pride warmed me at his words. Not vanity, but the deep satisfaction of being recognized for unwavering commitment to quality and authenticity. The very qualities my family had once dismissed as impractical perfectionism were now opening doors to new opportunities. "I'm heading back now," Marco said. "Dinner at home tonight?" Home, the word carried such significance. Rosewood had transformed from a business investment to the center of our shared life, the place where personal and professional fulfillment converged. "Perfect," I replied. "I'll see you soon." After we hung up, I climbed the stairs to my private residence, passing the photograph that now hung prominently in the hallway. Not the anonymous image from the estate reopening, but a new portrait of me standing proudly before Rosewood, accompanied by a framed feature from Architectural Digest, Maya Chen, Preserving the Past, Building the Future. In my terrace garden, I sat watching twilight descend over the estate grounds, contemplating the journey of the past 3 months. The revelation at Emma's wedding had been just the beginning, the moment that cracked open the facade of misunderstanding that had separated me from my family for so long. What followed had been a different kind of restoration project, rebuilding relationships damaged by years of dismissal and doubt, preserving their essential foundations while creating new patterns of interaction based on mutual respect rather than hierarchical judgment. Like any restoration, it remained a work in progress. There were still moments of tension, old habits that resurfaced in stressful situations. But the framework had fundamentally changed, creating space for genuine connection, where only performance and disappointment had existed before. As stars appeared above Rosewood, I thought about all the people who might be watching this video, people whose talents and dreams had been dismissed by those closest to them, whose authentic selves remained unseen beneath others' expectations and assumptions. To them I would say this: your vision doesn't require external validation to be valuable. Your path doesn't need to be understood by others to be right for you. The sweetest vindication comes not from proving critics wrong, but from creating something so undeniably excellent that it speaks for itself. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply continuing to believe in your own potential when no one else does, holding fast to your vision through disappointment and doubt until it manifests in ways too tangible to be denied. My story isn't about a dramatic moment of revenge, though the revelation certainly had its satisfactions. It's about the quiet persistence that made that moment possible, The years of work when no one was watching, the commitment to excellence when no one was applauding, the faith in my own judgment when everyone questioned it. So if you're working in shadows, building something others can't yet see, whether it's a business, an artistic vision, or simply an authentic life that doesn't fit conventional expectations, keep going. Your moment of recognition may not come wrapped in a perfect cinematic scene, but it will come. And when it does, you'll find that the true victory isn't in others finally seeing your worth, but in the person you became while proving it to yourself. The lights of Rosewood glowed warmly below me, a beacon of possibility in the gathering darkness. Not just my home or business, but a testament to the power of persistent vision, of seeing potential where others see only problems, of creating beauty that transforms not just spaces but the people who move through them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.